You're welcome. Absolutely welcome.
I saw in your LinkedIn that you're climbing.
Yeah. It's an unusual hobby. I mean, there's climbing and there's ice climbing. Ice climbing is a little bit, definitely a niche hobby.
Yes, definitely.
I'm not entirely sure why I do it. I do know why I do it. My father was a mountain guide, so I grew up in the mountains. So people often think I'm kind of obsessed with doing ridiculously dangerous and cold stuff. But it's almost like, I don't know anything else. I've always done it. And I'd rather be outside than inside. So people think I love the cold and put myself in those situations. It's just that I don't like staying indoors and I need to do something. So I kind of have these set of skills that enable me to get out in the cold and have some adventure. So yeah, it's definitely an unusual hobby.
Yes, and I guess you have to start to learning early because it's difficult.
Yeah, well, actually, that's an interesting topic. It's actually the experience part. You can't cheat experience. So you can watch all the YouTube videos you like and read all the books, but being in the mountains is all about kind of having that kind of those experiences and just kind of learning from them and understanding the conditions, particularly with ice. You can't learn, what ice is doing, via YouTube. You've got to be able to kind of hear your picks going. You've got to kind of sort of really keep an eye on the weather. You've got to kind of just kind of understand it. So yeah, a lot of experience for sure.
Yeah, my son is into the mountain climbing right now, but we are in Miami. We just have these walls, these.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm taking every single weekend.
I mean, I used to own climbing gyms.
Really?
Yeah. I used to own about 12 of them in the
Wow,
UK.
that's so fascinating.
It's a story in itself. My dad was ex-military. After the military, he kind of struggled. He went back into reserve forces and became a kind of mountain guide. And, he started teaching. And during that time, I was in corporate working and we found a disused climbing gym no one used. It was part of a university, but it was very, very old, not very well utilized. And we set up together a kind of junior club, like on Saturdays. And we did birthday parties and we started doing courses in a week. And it kind of grew. And then I left corporate, set up a training company, and I thought I would kind of use that as a kind of platform, to try and get some team building work. So I invented some team building games based on climbing. And kind of long story short, but I ended up finding some other gyms that no one used, particularly school gyms, because people kind of build them. And then the person whose idea it was moves on and there's no one else to run it, or they realize actually it's a lot more dangerous than we thought it was. So we ended up kind of renovating a series of kind of school gyms and rec center gyms across London, and eventually kind of built our own wall and run a big government contract to run another. So I ended up with like 12 odd gyms. We had an island we did survival courses on. Then we became one of the largest UK youth team building suppliers, and then did some corporate team building. But yeah, we a lot of the work was all climbing and mountain work.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. And what happened? What did you do with your businesses?
I sold it. And that's the story in itself because, I'd come and visit my wife's family in the US. And, as we got kids and stuff, remember, my mother-in-law would always get upset at the airport, saying goodbye to her grandchild. And then one year her dad was crying. And I sat on that plane and just, I don't really have a close family. I literally just have a dad. And, I just realized the kids would be better off with the family that love them and my wife's brothers and all the cousins. So I got back from that trip and said, hey, I think we should sell the business. After you spent 15 years building a business and go through years of having no money. I mean, the first year, I was eating rice flavored with tomato ketchup because I had no money for food. And then suddenly building it into a bit of an empire, walking away from that is tough. But it was the best thing I ever did. It worked out well in the end.
With the time you see the results, right? The meaning of selling the business.
I've been thinking about this recently, and I kind of feel that success, particularly in the social media world we live in now, is almost like a film sports montage. That's how people think of success. But, it takes decades. And I feel Yeah, it would make a good sports montage of like, that journey of like building it all up and then walking away from it and then kind of building it all up again. That's been, what's it, 10 years in 10 years now, and I'm finally back up at that stage where I probably left the UK, building a bit of an empire, but it took 10 years to get back to, I think,
Yes.
where I was before.
Yeah. Yeah. Same happened to me with my businesses. It's just, I mean, the run of move completely my journey, I used to have salons and barber shops and all of that, and now completely doing different things.
So, how did that? So, how did you switch from that? How did you go from
Well,
that?
no, I always been involved in marketing. I used to be a marketing director from one of the biggest agencies in Peru, but I left that to build my business with my wife. She's a hairdresser, and 10 years now since that. I left all of it, no, 15 years more. And I left that to build a salon with her. Then we grew up, put another salon, barbershops, retail for beauty things. And 6 years after pandemic hit, we moved to Miami, and she didn't want to come back at all.
I can understand why. I spent a lot of time in Fort Lauderdale, by the way.
Yeah.
More so for Miami, but yeah, I know Fort Lauderdale quite well.
Yes. Yes. And we never go back. We never go back.
That's an interesting. I could unpick that conversation about the marketing part because I also spent most of my corporate time in marketing. And what I've realized is, particularly in my industry now, we do team development, leadership coaching. Some of the more successful coaches aren't there. They're not so much coaches, that's what's made them successful is the marketing. Yeah. And then I work with some of the best coaches in the world,
Yeah.
and luckily they survive, off their network. But I think there's a whole breed of really good coaches, but not so successful because it's the marketing piece that they're not very good at. You can't, and I always think it's difficult to be a kind of rocket scientist and a brain surgeon. And some of the best coaches aren't necessarily the most successful, which always frustrates me. And then you get a lot of people offering you to become a successful coach and they're going to teach you their formula. But in reality, they've never been a coach, and you dig a bit deeper into their profiles and you realize that, successful leadership coaches, there's not many people to leadership coach. There's not many companies who can afford it. And in those companies, there's not many people that need it. Like, it's only the top level or normally have it. And so there's more leadership coaches from there are people to coach. You meet these people teaching you to be a coach. And when you kind of pull back and look at their background, it's like they've never been a coach. And you don't necessarily need to have been a senior to be a coach, but you at least need a strong qualification and a methodology. But yeah, it's fascinating. And the link is for marketing. I find that if you've got that really strong marketing and sales background, you can often kind of pivot to a number of industries and make it successful.
I think so. And that is come to one of the trends in the chart, right? Companies and businesses is stop looking about the position of the role. And I think it's more looking about the skills of the people. I don't think you know what you think about that. It's just, I think it's a shift. And I think it's for all this technology, communication, social media, AI, company will start looking more and more to what are the skills, how many skills that you have, instead, what was the last role that you had.
We hit on some really fun subjects here. So this is another passionate subject. But yeah, we find, we're within that industry, obviously, and we find people are normally hiring on resumes and skills. Yeah, for sure. And, what we do is we're a behavioral science company, effectively. So we build talent strategies, we align teams with strategy, we look at engagement and retention, but it starts with putting the right person in the right seat. And so although we don't do hiring, we don't search people. We do a lot of behavioral profiling. Profiling is the wrong word. We do a lot of behavioral work in analyzing jobs and then mapping candidates to those jobs. And the formula or the model we use, and I've just sent out a newsletter on this actually to our clients, is something called, we interview the whole person, and we call it the Head Heart Briefcase model. So what we want to look at is the briefcase, which is what most people hire on. They hire on skills, experience, and qualifications. That's your briefcase. But you also want to look at the heart, which is values and culture fit. And also the head, which we look at behavioral and cognitive fit. So what we're trying to do is improve job success predictability by using data. So what we do is we work with these companies to build this Head Heart Briefcase model, and we kind of score or put a metric on their briefcase: skills, experience, and qualifications. We put a number on that culture fit, that values fit. And we often ask for a more junior employee to do that interview, someone up and coming, because it gives them practice on interviewing, and it also kind of gives the candidate a better experience of meeting someone else in the organization. And effectively, that could just be, looking at your values and asking questions on those examples. Tell me a time where you've demonstrated transparency or resilience, whatever your values are. Then we take that data, we combine it with the behavioral data and cognitive data. So we often do 2 assessments. So we analyze the job behaviorally and then do a 6-minute behavioral assessment to the candidate. And we look at alignment on the job. It's not, if they're totally misaligned, that's like putting a left-hand person in a right-hand person's job. They're just not going to work. They're not going to enjoy it. It's not going to help anyone. But if they're slightly misaligned, at least we know that bit of information and we can work with them. And then the other bit of data is for cognitive data. Now, some roles don't need a particularly high cognitive, and we don't need to do that, but some do. So that's what we're trying to do, is use all that data to improve job success predictability. And that's when we get better hiring. So that I'm particularly passionate about that.
Just my second question. What is Talent Optimizer?
You think about we want to put the right people on the right seats. We also make sure the bus is going in the right direction. So when we think about talent strategy, what we do is, as a business strategy, we do a little bit of business strategy because often we're brought into dysfunctional teams and we find out that, they haven't got a robust way of building, implementing and tracking strategy. And that's a bigger problem from the people part, because our job is to align the people to the strategy. So we do a little bit of work, and we all too often find out organizations need that support. So we do a little bit of strategy. And then for the most part, we build talent strategies and help execute those strategies. And what that includes is the right people in the right seat. It includes aligning teams to strategy. It includes leadership training, engagement surveys, and a range of services around making sure talents can execute strategy.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So originally from Old England. I'm now living in New England. And I set off in corporate. So, I can go deep. I can talk forever, but I'll give you the highlights. But I was in corporate for companies like Acer Computers and Dell EMC, some very large tech companies. And I actually did a behavioral assessment early in my career. I did a DISC assessment, and it just changed my life. I kind of knew I was a good performer, but also knew that my manager had a frustration with me and I couldn't work out why. So then after doing my DISC training, I realized I was lacking a bit of self-awareness and my communication adaptation wasn't very strong. So after doing that training, I could adapt my communication and be a little bit more analytical, which my manager was. And he'd say, Damon, how are you doing? And rather than giving a very high-level answer, I could say, hey, John, I'm 90% of my target. I think I'll finish on 110 at the end of the quarter and I need help with ABC. So as soon as I made that shift in the way I communicated, our relationship got better and I became obsessed with personal development, particularly behavior. And so zoom forward, I think 10, 12 years from that point, I set up a training company and it kind of grew like crazy. I sold that, relocated to the US to be closer to my wife's family, and ended up begging a company called Predictive Index for a job. And because I knew who they were, they're one of the largest assessment companies, behavioral assessment companies. And at the time, they were kind of growing. They'd been a kind of family business for a number of years, and they just had a big chunk of investment put into them. And I kept on kind of reaching out to them. And eventually, I think they got fed up with me and said, Damon, we'll give you a job. So my role there was training the management consultants, supporting them growing, a training company because I had experience of doing that. And eventually, this is a story in itself, they were kind of looking for my next movement within the company. And they didn't really have anything for me. I was actually quite happy to stay in what I was doing. I absolutely enjoyed my job. But they had some global clients they needed some help with. They mostly sell through consultants, but they had a few direct clients. And they were looking to kind of find a home for them so they could refocus on the software. and they offered me to take those over. So I took over a handful of accounts, set up on my own. 4 years later, we're now up to like over 60 clients across the globe and growing like crazy. So yeah, that's the kind of brief intro.
Wow. And in this journey of 4 years, what did you try at the beginning that didn't work?
That's a great question. I mean, and also I think that's the reason why we've built 2 successful businesses now. And I always get frustrated with these gurus which tell you they can help you grow a business. Yeah, because a lot of it's luck. And I think the other part is making lots of mistakes. And so I think the success has mostly come from resilience in making mistakes and keep on pushing. You have to be comfortable. And we've made so many. Trying to think my biggest mistake. I may kind of answer this in a different way, because when we set up, the kind of advice and consulting out there was to really value your time and bill for stuff, and very much focused on billing, and particularly in the consulting industry. We thought, well, we know that most companies fail at doing this, because in my role at Predictive Index, I say fail, but I say probably a better word is find it difficult to actually get where they want to get, because it's a very popular industry. And when we set up, we kind of realized that, okay, we don't want to do what everyone else does. And we started with our values. We really dug into our values, and we came up with better work, better world. We actually stole it off Predictive Index. So I can't take credit for it, because I genuinely believe that we're helping people.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe that if we can put the right people in the right seats, they're happier, they go home happier. I've been in that job, which I wasn't hardwired to do, and I was dreadful at it. And I was stressed and had anxiety. And I generally feel what we do is a really positive thing. So then starting with that, and this is a very convoluted response, but hopefully I'll get there and it makes sense. We decided that we weren't going to prioritize billing hours.
Okay.
We decided that we were going to do everything we can do to support our clients or potential clients to get to the point where they're looking after their people, and they're a people-first organization, and it didn't matter about the money. So we took the choice to do free training. We had a client struggling financially. We'd say, it's okay, don't pay us. We'll come in and do it for free, because some of them had like software contracts, which we couldn't get out of. So, particularly in the COVID situation or post-COVID and the climate at the moment, we've had a lot of clients say, we're struggling. We've got no supply chain. We can't afford this. And so we just took the approach, we'll do it for free. And that went back to those values. And so everybody was telling us that was a bad strategy and we shouldn't be doing that, and you're giving away too much. And there was a moment where I thought, well, maybe they're right, because we would package in a ridiculous onboarding bundle, which we knew other companies were charging tens of thousands of dollars for, and we'd do it for free. And I just felt I could go and do what everyone else does, which is spend loads of money on LinkedIn marketing or, ads or whatever, or I could just protect the clients I did have and just be a really nice person, a really good company, and have the right ethos. And for a period of 2 years, I think at the end of the 2 years, I was thinking, I don't think that was a good plan now. But then something magical happened. We had some huge expansions. We had one expansion was on, it's a global company, but only a small part of the company used our service, and they were going to cancel it. We did some free training, and they kind of grew from a 5K contract to a 150K contract. So at the end of that 2 years, we started seeing a lot about it. We started seeing a lot of these clients who we would have lost, or we decided to go deeper and do more training, and other departments discovered what we were doing. And in year 3, we just exploded. And I think it's a result of going back to the question is, what did you do badly? I think for the first 2 years, I think, this is a mistake.
Yeah.
It ended up not. And so almost now it's a dichotomy in the sense that we deliberately see our advantage as being a people-first organization and prioritizing our clients' people over profits.
And that came with this question. Who buy your services? Now you're talking about...
Usually organizations who are going through two types of organizations. They're either going through retention and engagement challenges, and they're trying to solve them, or they're just very proactive on people. For the most part, is organizations, they do an engagement survey and results are bad, or you've got some dysfunction in the leadership team, or revenue's dropping. So they realize, most problems in an organization are people problems, but there's very little focus on people. So a lot of organizations are going through some pain, And we're brought in to try and kind of support that. And then we do have a handful of organizations who are just super proactive on people. And ironically, everyone's growing and flourishing more than others. My organizations are very proactive on their support for talent. Other ones just crushing it. And the people buying are usually either CEOs or CHROs.
Okay. And that may be more in the core of the services and this industry that is, like, honestly, is one of the things that I very believe in. It's the teamwork. And I did amazing teamwork myself when I was building my salons, but this is another story.
Well, I think some people are like naturally inclined to think about like that. But what we try and do is put some data around that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We get into it then, okay? My question is, why do most companies hire wrong?
Yeah, I think it goes back to not having a very strong system to analyze job success predictability. And going back to Head Heart Briefcase, how can we build a system which doesn't rely on the hiring manager's gut? So most hiring is like, I just make my own decisions. I hire on my gut. So there's no standardization. And even in large organizations. So, for me, it's about building a repeatable system based on data and science and avoiding that gut instinct, which is the one that makes bad hiring decisions. So we know for a fact that the best predictor of job success is a behavioral assessment and a cognitive assessment together. All too often, the hiring managers think it's their gut instinct that makes a better job predictor. It doesn't. It doesn't exist. But going back to Head Heart Briefcase, what we want to use is the behavioral cognitive, the culture fit, and the briefcase experience, skills, and qualifications, and take all that data and build a system which is repeatable and can be scaled to do that. And it can be scaled. I mean, that's what we do. We got software to do that now. So I'm going to give you a number, which is kind of crazy. We worked with one of the largest retail chains globally. Mm-hmm. And we just looked at one geographic region and we discovered if we could go back in time, we did an analysis. We looked at behavioral data and we contrast it with success metrics, which were store revenue. And if we could have gone back in time a year and replaced the bottom 25% of behavioral fits to okay behavioral fits and above, we'd gone from a 40 million loss in revenue to a 2 million gain. And that was just that was taking that data back and realizing that those bad behavioral profiles bad. There's no bad or good behavioral profile, but for a job, some behavioral profiles work better, like extroversion. Yeah. So, and so the data is conclusive, like the data works. So that would be my kind of response there, is taking a more analytical data and science-driven approach.
What did you see in the data that separates a good performer sales representative from a guy who, is productive, all in, top notch?
Sure. Right. So when we look at salespeople, there's what makes a good salesperson. It's knowing how to sell, the art form of the skill on how to sell. It's being motivated, having that kind of motivation to get up and kind of push, and experience kind of comes in there as well. But so we focus on that. So we do some quite in-depth validation studies on behavior. So it depends what type of sales job, and there's other factors here. When you do this research, there's territory factors, there's management factors impacting. So it's very big subjects. But from a pure behavior point of view, I can go down a rabbit hole on behavioral data. I don't think your audience are going to want to know the science part. So I'll try and kind of keep it high level. So what we can do is analyze what the job needs. Now, different sales jobs require different recipes of behavior. So an account manager is very different from a hunter, or a farmer is very different from a hunter. Both are sales jobs. A technical salesperson is very different from a fast-moving consumer goods salesperson. So there's, different industries. So there's a lot of factors in here. So we start by analyzing what that specific job needs. And there's normally 4 types of behaviors, or 4 behavioral drives, we call them, which show up from workplace. We have dominance, which is the behavioral drive to influence people and events. We have extroversion, which is the behavioral drive for social interaction with others. So it's a big one in sales. It's also a thinking style. So actually, we always think we need high extroversion for sales, but sometimes for low extroversion is where the listening comes from. So you've either got to hire and train people to understand behavioral stretch so they listen better, or look at someone who we call situational on extroversion. We always presume that you need high extroversion for sales, but there's some kind of deeper stuff in there. So that's the second one, extroversion. We have patience, which is the behavioral drive for consistency and stability. Again, quite interesting. We typically go for low patience on salespeople because we want them fast moving and flexible. But sometimes in corporate environments, they're doing the same process day after day after day. So if we look at that patience behavior, it's once you get through the midpoint, it's a behavioral change. You've got people either low patience or high patience, and they're totally different behaviors. And that's where people struggle in jobs. One job needs high patience, but you're low patience, you're going to struggle. But for sales, we typically recruit on low patience, but there's aspects of high patience in that job. Like a BDR has to repeat the same thing day after day, hour after hour. You need high patience, but typically we recruit for low patience. So you've either pick one or the other, or educate and stretch and consider that. Otherwise, they burn out and leave in 4 months. Last one is formality, and that's the behavioral drive to follow rules and structure. Again, we typically, for salespeople, hire for low formality, people who are flexible, and very quick on their feet and can think and change and adapt. But when you've got maybe an example, SaaS sales floor of 60 reps, how you manage that is through consistency and following a playbook, because you may get kind of 4 reps do it their own way and smash out the park, but you can't manage a sales team like that. So what you typically do is give them a very set process, even to a point of knowing when to pause and say, does this resonate? And, we give them a very set playbook, because then you can tweak it and you can look at that sales process and adapt it and look at the numbers and really build a high performance sales process. But the same, we hire for low formality typically, but we need aspects of high formality in some sales jobs. So again, long answer, we typically measure dominance, extroversion, patience, and formality. We normally assess what the job is. It can change industry to industry, company to company. Then we map the candidates to that. So the typical sales profile is high dominance and extroversion, low patience and formality. That's a kind of typical go-to sales profile. But with any sales profile, there's going to be elements of the job where behaviorally they're going to struggle with. So I'm going to answer that question is there's no particularly good or bad profile. It's very dependent on company and industry and type of sales role. And whatever behavior you do hire, that's just one part of a coin. There's going to be some behavioral stretch in the job, which you can analyze, understand, and put processes in place to support. And if you get those 2 things right, you put the right people in the right seats behaviorally, and you educate on behavioral stretch, that's when you're going to knock your sales numbers out of the park.
So fascinating and neat.
You're hitting all my, I'm not normally like this, by the way. You're hitting all my favorite subjects.
And this, when the companies say to you, hey, our sales team is not performing. I understand you go right to the data, but let's say they have no data. Where do you look first?
Setting up for the data. So hang on. So sales teams seeing poor performance and, okay. So putting my consulting hat in there. So it's just a lot of questions and a lot of kind of understanding, so understanding how they're setting their numbers. And even large organizations, Charlotte, you'd be surprised.
Yes.
You'd think that it's often these small growing companies haven't quite got that figured out yet. But I often find it's the opposite. Sometimes large organizations, they're going through a lot of pain and they're stagnant and they're clunky and not very maneuverable. But whatever it is, setting up, it's getting an independent person to come in. Companies are often reluctant to pay a consultant to come in and do this because they see it's expensive. But that consultant brings so much breadth of experience they can also, they don't get fired for asking difficult questions. If you do something, if it's internal, you can get fired. So having an external consultant, we've got the ability to have tough conversations. And then for us, when we're doing sales work, we're going and looking at those processes, looking at how they build their sales funnels, building out how the tech stack is built on, is it Salesforce or HubSpot? How are we managing their reps? How are we looking at data? How are we doing their training? So yeah, that's kind of big question. But yeah, I think it starts at, having someone come in and doing a proper analysis of the process.
And this is interesting for our audience, for our entrepreneurs, is how long does it take to know if a hire was a mistake?
I often answer that in a different way. We often find out that it wasn't the fact that the hire was a mistake. We often find out the mistake is elsewhere in the process. So we often find out that the hire is not a behaviorally strong fit to the job. And we got tools to analyze that. We often find out that maybe the manager isn't adapting the communication to fit with the hire's communication. So what I would say is out of 10 bad hires, I often think the majority we can kind of salvage, because people don't wake up and think, I'm going to be rubbish at this job. They don't wake up and think, I'm going to come in and give poor effort, or I don't want this job. For the most part, people are pretty motivated. But what we typically find is that it's often a kind of bad job fit behaviorally. We often find there's often communication challenges with the manager. And a good example recently is we had someone who was very analytical, liked consistency and stability, and wanted to see how something was done. And the manager was very high level and vague. Another example, this is a fantastic example. We had a senior exec not perform after 6 months or 7, 8 months. They were doing site audits on building construction sites.
Mm-hmm.
And we were brought in to do some coaching, because there were some mistakes in reports, lines were being missed. And the first thing we did is we did a behavioral assessment. It was a female and a team. And we analyzed her behavioral profile, mapped it to the job, and it seemed a good fit. But then we looked at the team's alignment to strategy. So one of the tools we have is we can analyze team alignment to strategy. So we can look at a team's strengths and caution areas as a collective, and then we can contrast that very visually with the goals they're trying to achieve and look for misalignment. And we initially sold like a 12-session leadership coaching engagement. And they're normally quite expensive because it's kind of people and man hours. The coaching engagements are expensive. But even pre-session, even before we got to the first session, we realized it wasn't the leader's challenge. She'd inherited this team from like site managers. And if we looked at the table, we look at 4 quadrants on strategy. The strategy was in the bottom left quadrant. All the team was in the top right quadrant, which is basically putting a whole team of left-handed people in right-hand person's jobs. So the reason why she wasn't getting the job done wasn't so much her. She behaviorally was a great fit. The whole team was not behaviorally hardwired to enjoy or be particularly good at this job. So they were turning up at the sites. Everyone loved them, by the way. Like the feedback on these, because they were going, having, chatting, very engaging, very sociable. That's not what needed to be done. They needed to be very process driven. This team they had were comfortable with ambiguity, very high level, very social, not very data driven. The job they needed was a team of people who were going to follow a process, be very consistent, not be comfortable with ambiguity, get in, be almost reserved, do the numbers and get out. It wasn't her. So I think that's a good example of dealing with a bad hire. Often it's not actually more often than not, it's not actually for hire's challenge. It's there's other circumstances impacting that.
Wow, just so fascinating. Let's move on to about your business. What part of your business feel most constraining right now? Like in this process of giving services as a business, as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, what is the thing that feels more constrained right now to you?
Yeah, this is an easy one because I've been thinking about it a lot recently. It's scaling when it comes to people and taking that risk. And I think there's this pendulum of hiring and taking a little bit of a risk to scale versus patience. So my big thing is like, be patient. I don't need to scale more. As long as I'm not working 18-hour days and, we're doing okay. We've only got a small team. We've got 3 or 4. It's, when do I pull the trigger on that next hire, and just being patient, because I think it comes down to me. I want to grow. I want to get big. And I had to kind of say to myself, it's okay. It's okay. But that's the biggest challenge is scaling, but also finding good people. Like, we're not an organization that, the talent's going to go to be a large organization where we get all the benefits of healthcare, particularly in America. It is what it is. I'm not being political or critical here. It's easier, believe it or not, considering America's a land of opportunity. It's very difficult for people in America to set up their own business. Because of healthcare and because of for kind of pension situation. In other countries like the UK, we get free healthcare, we get a state pension, so it's much easier to take the risk, and that goes to hiring as well. I don't have the benefits larger companies can give, so it's harder for me to sort of give a good package to someone. And we've just kind of made a decision to, now we've got a pension plan and we can offer pension plans now. So we're kind of going that way. But to get there, it's very hard. Like, to kind of suddenly go, okay, right, we're going to scale and get some talent on board. Like, the cost and the ease of doing that is very difficult, particularly in the US. So that's the challenge I think we got at the moment is, being patient and kind of trying to find the right talent, when we don't really have too much to offer compared to these larger organizations. So the first part was knowing when to scale and finding talent. And the second part is just wearing too many hats. So particularly as a CEO, all CEOs go wear a lot of hats, but
Correct.
particularly I think we're coming out of startup mode. I mean, would I call us a startup? I think we've kind of gone past startup stage, but even so, I have to wear so many hats. And that's exhausting. And also maybe that's why we are successful. So I think that's maybe the blocker for other people coming example. Behaviorally, if we unpick it from a science point of view, there's some profiles, some natural behavioral DNA, which doesn't allow wearing lots of hats. So behaviorally, I'm much more inclined to be comfortable with kind of switching gears and doing different things. So there's definitely a part of my innate behavior that allows me to kind of almost enjoy doing, switching. But still, it's hard, particularly when it comes to my finance, which I don't like to do. That really is tough for me. I think I got an email. What I try and do is, like, my inbox, I try and keep it low. And I know there's a couple of quite heavy finance emails. There's a pension thing I have to do and loads of legal forms. And there's some accounts I've got to do for another business, actually. And I got to consolidate them and send them to the accountants. Oh, they just stay in my inbox. I know I have to get them done.
Yeah. It's
Oh
like
my
you
God.
procrastinate that, right?
Oh,
Yeah. It happens to me too. Yeah. I hate it. What part of your workflow you wish was more automated? You're talking about a software.
yeah. So interestingly, going back to behavior, I'm not really a systems or naturally an organized person, but knowing of that, I kind of overcompensate because I know I'm quite competitive and I know I have to get that done. Yeah. So we have quite a surprisingly organized tech stack, to try and manage our systems. So our kind of main ones, we have a performance management software, which tracks all our goals. Have a weekly meeting. We know exactly where we are with our KPIs, our goals, our kind of key initiatives, all our to-dos. So that's in a software. And we get our reminders. We have Monday morning meetings. We know exactly we're on track for our year target, which is built into a 3-year target, 5-year target. And we use a system called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, as a model, a business operating system on our business. So that bit of software tracks that. It also logs all our meeting notes and all that. So we're pretty good on that side. And then we have a HubSpot enterprise account, which manages all our sales automation. We got our deal dashboards. We got all the analytics on our websites and how many opens our emails. That does everything. And then what else do we use? We started trying to utilize AI more, but that on the sales side is really important now. But we're kind of organically, we're getting so many leads through, like from just referrals and just our marketing. We have a GTM director, but he's at the moment just dealing with proposals because we're actually getting a lot of lead generation through, which is very unusual. And we're very happy about, going back to that question, we did start off the year saying, right, we need to utilize AI more because we're going to get a BDR or build out that sales team. And it's just, we need to do it because of AI. So in HubSpot, we have like AI agents, we got BDR agents. There's a lot of tools. Rather than having that people resource, we can utilize them. But then we got a couple of big opportunities coming through from private equity firms. So we're working, we just got too much delivery and referrals coming through. So going back to that question, what could be easier?
You have a lot going on.
Yeah, I think we're in a reasonably good place. I've just had some meetings as a consultant. I go eat my own dog food. If I'm saying that you should get a consultant in to do your leadership development and training and all that and talent strategies, then we need to be open to get people in. So we've just gone through a few meetings with some AI kind of specialists, and they didn't really produce much. But I think that will change in a year's time because we're still quite early on that journey. But the moment our kind of systems are pretty much locked in.
But I think this is it's a learning curve, right? My next question comes from that. Where does AI create leverage and where does it create noise?
Yeah. So that's it. It's so that's such a good question. And I think that's the question organizations need to ask themselves. I may steal that and quote it. It was so good. And that's the bit, is that when you are you too early on it? Like, and when are you leave it too late and you lose that advantage? And that's the bit. That was our main thing in Q1, by the way, was to really analyze how AI can impact us. And we did a lot of research. We saw some consultants, and as I said, in the sales side, there's a real opportunity there, which if you really want to be competitive, you need to be on. But on the client success side, it's not quite there yet for us. And then on the marketing side, there was some opportunity on video, and it's just, again, it's not quite there yet. It's nearly there. All these companies are telling you they're going to just totally. We have a very successful YouTube channel, and we do kind of very focused on software and talent strategy software and predictive index is very focused on this product we sell. But yeah, we kind of explored, well, do I really need to set up a studio, and produce for scripts, and do the optimization and do all that kind of stuff. And we did a massive feasibility study into kind of switching over to AI. And it is, I think, probably still 2 years off. So eventually you can feel me tap in the script, it'll do it all for me. But I don't think we're there for 2 years. And despite the organizations telling me we're there, and we saw some great examples, but for cost, it's still cheaper for me to go to the studio and get the scripts in, film them all, send them off to my agency, get them back. It's still cheaper and better from AI at the moment. I have no doubt, I think in 2 years' time, it'll be different and you won't know. I mean, I think in 5 years' time, you won't know whether I'm real or you're talking to an AI agent. But at the moment, we did that big study, and that was a Q1 initiative, and it's not there yet.
So for you, how you look the next 12 months for your business?
How do I look? What do you mean?
Well, in the next 12 minutes, what will be the hardest for your business? In terms, I don't know, in terms of this AI, because let me tell you, I interview 3 different entrepreneurs that are building an app for HR with AI, right? And the thing is growing and growing and growing. And all of that is competition, right? So how do you see that?
Yeah, so I don't need to go out and build an app to make money. So we're in a very fortunate situation in terms of my personal life, as that, I'm not financially motivated. Okay. I'm kind of motivated by success and love to build things and stuff. But, so that makes a big difference for an entrepreneur. So, I mean, I'd always like more money. I mean, there's always a new car I want to buy. But, if suddenly I had more money, there wouldn't be a lot I changed my life. Very little, that really influences how much risk I'm going to put on and where my focus is going to go. So the moments I enjoy what I love what I do, we're making a real impact to organizations, we're helping people. I get up every morning and I'm so happy. What I could do is be a little bit more entrepreneurial and invest more and do some more entrepreneurial work. And we've actually also just built an app and it's been an amazing experience, and ours is very specialist. I mean, it's not going to set the world alight. It's a very specific app for our clients who run on our software platform. Yeah, it's a kind of complementary app.
Okay.
It should get some traction. The cost per development was minuscule. It was all AI generated, and so we're about to launch it in about a week. But I think going back to that question is, I'm in a situation where I enjoy what I do. I love what we're doing. I'm what we call a predictive index maverick profile, which means I'm very naturally entrepreneurial. I like to do different things. And I know that, and I do have an itch to kind of do these things, but I have people rely on me now. So we run our business operating systems instead of EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and we do our year planning. We back it into quarters. And I'm so laser focused on what our mission is. And we have a very specific mission to grow this consultancy to a certain size. And that's all I need to do. I enjoy it. It's easy. If you do this and that and you get distracted everywhere, you don't grow. So, and I've really got shiny object syndrome. Yeah. I am laser focused on what our mission is, and that's building talent optimizers and getting to our kind of, I think it's 100 clients by the end of next year. And we got all our goals written out. That's where I'm focused. However, part of my 5-year plan is that I'm opting myself out of the business over 5 years. So I think by 5 years, I want to be 50% working on entrepreneurial activities. So in a way, that question is quite interesting because I do have a plan, but I think that is often where entrepreneurs screw up and get into problems, is that they're just too distracted. So I, for that reason, being laser focused on the short term on the business. We got a few fun things going on. But once I've got the YouTube channel where we want it, once we're hitting our client numbers, I think in about 3 years, I'll start, investing and maybe kind of setting up some kind of side hustles. We did set up another business last year, but I worked with someone, it's called Sharing the Pie. It's for predictive index consultants, and it's outsourcing all their admin work because it's very specific. If you do talent optimization and you run off certain software platforms, there's a challenge every organization has, and it's often admin. And I was having it. So I met an entrepreneurial, awesome person I used to work with. And I said, do you want to set up a side hustle? I'll be your first customer. And so I have all my admin, which we can't automate, going through another company called Sharing the Pie, because PI is the name of the company we mostly sell. Yeah. And so he runs that and I'm a partner in that. But I'm very hands-off on that, very hands-off. I just handed over my intellectual property and all my systems and my onboarding and my management. And then he's replicated it to other companies. And that's going really well. But yeah, I'm going to be laser focused on what our mission is, and that's better work, better world.
That's great. Wow. When you take decisions, what decision almost slow your company significantly? Can you remember?
In growth, slowing growth. Let me answer this for other companies.
Yeah.
And it relates to me as well. What we find is if I could play leadership bingo, there's 5 things that always happen. And I almost feel I could save leadership teams a lot of money with an outside consultant because it's always the same thing that pops up. It's number one, not having that robust way of building, implementing, tracking strategy, poorly run meetings, no long-term strategic plan for leadership development. There's a few other things in there, but the one I want to talk about here is we call high dominance behavior in leadership teams. So we often find the CEO is very high dominance. So that's the behavioral drive to influence people and events. So they're almost hardwired to get their own way. So when it comes to decision making, they kind of know best. And I'm talking not, self-aware leaders, but even aware leaders. So often they know best, they're driving. And then what happens, we get a few similar behaviors in that leadership team. And so what we do is we get magnified behavior. This is a great idea. And these behaviors we typically see in leadership teams are comfort of ambiguity, fast-paced, bit task-orientated, that high kind of like my idea is the best idea, let's get done. But in that team, we see some other behavioral types, particularly low extroversion, who like to have data to make decisions. Those behaviors who like to mitigate against risk. Those behaviors we want to understand for how are we going to do it. So what happens is those high A behaviors over dominate that, and we get something called artificial harmony, which destroys teams. What we want is healthy conflict to make those better decisions, but often we get either mean-spirited conflict or artificial harmony, which is even worse. So making those decisions which impact the business, we often find as a result of high dominant behavior, not having that awareness and a system in place to have someone like a CFO or CRO to pump on the brakes and look at the impact on the teams below. So I'm in danger of that being incredibly high dominance. So I try and put systems in place so they balance me out. But that's where I see that problem coming from is particularly leadership teams. We have a collective behavioral type, and there's not a system in place to kind of make that decision process better with healthy conflict.
And that came for a question about as a business. How do you know when to say no to a client?
Probably not. I'm not. That's probably my Achilles heel. Yeah. But I got Scott, who works for me, who does say no. I do have fun doing is I'm slowly.
You have to say no.
Yeah, I'm not.
In the kind of service you do.
I am terrible at that. That's probably my biggest weakness, one of my biggest weaknesses. But luckily, Scott now takes the lead, and he's my GTM director, and he will tell me often that, okay, Damon, I'm going to have this conversation. Like you're rubbish at it, and so he's being tougher on me and say, even last week we were in a competitive bid, and I should know better because I'm like, sales background, but I'm like, well, let's just get the business in and then we'll grow it after. And he was like, no, we're not doing that. I don't want this business unless they value our time, And I said earlier that I've been very, again, I'm not very mission focused, better work, better world, and profits come some behind that. But also, having that balance to have someone say to me, no, David, we still need to kind of make a profit to keep the lights on. Yeah. And so, I'm not so good at saying no, but I do have some people around me who are.
And then comes a question is...
Oh, one other question. My CFO, my finance person, would also tell me no a lot. A lot.
Damon, what is your mindset?
What is my mindset? Oh, can you expand on that?
What motivates you? What keeps you? What drives you? What is the keep you be resilient? What is the keep you every single day pushing and pushing?
I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I think there's some quite dark childhood trauma, psychological aspects to this, but I kind of own them. I think, coming from a background of poverty and underprivilege and impacted my motivation to success. And I think the bad side of that, I think it manifests itself in a little bit of ego and probably a little bit of, some behaviors which will win at all costs, because I was so determined to be a success. And I think, people told me, no, you couldn't do that. I was going to prove them wrong. If, I had this kind of inkling to be better than everyone. And I kind of own that. And I think there's some aspects of that are positive, but a lot of aspects which aren't positive. And I kind of, is what it is. And I think in my early career, I was so motivated. And it was probably money focused and ego focused. But now, when you have those kids that come along, everything changes. Now, I think what drives me or motivates me in my mindset is number one, my own personal health. People may feel it's a bit strange because you'd think it's family. So family's second, and I'll explain why. My mindset is my own personal health, and that's mental health and physical health. So I insist on being healthy, working out, eating right food, and really making sure that gets prioritized. Because I remember early in my career, like work always came first. My health suffered, whether it's a bad back or whether it's, mental health. So that's my mindset is I have to be fit and healthy. And if I'm fit and healthy and I look after myself, I can look after my family better. And so definitely my mindset definitely is my family is the be all and end all of everything I do in my life. And then it's just giving back. I think I'd move on. The last one is going back to about better work, better worlds. In terms of my mindset of what gets me up in the morning and keeps me going and focused and motivated, I think it'd be those three things: just making sure my own personal health and well-being is good, looking after my family, and then spreading the mission of making the world a slightly better place than it is. I'm going to give the same answer. Is that building my values, and I've got my values on my website, and we do actually a values workshop, and that's another one of our most important workshops, and people don't realize the value of it. But we built our values. That's the first thing we did. We before anything, we said, what are we going to be?
The culture, right?
Excuse me.
Like this, like it popular says, is set the culture.
Yeah. So we thought, like, what do we want to be? Like, what are our values? And that just changed everything, because then I think people wanted to work with us. And everything we do, we hire on our values. We do performance reviews on our values. We fire on our values. We've never fired anyone yet. No, one. But that's everything we do is kind of values driven. And that's the first thing we did. And that's the best thing we did. And that's what I kind of sort of recommend for any organization. We typically find organizations have values, and we do a little bit of a trick, actually. On one of our workshops, not a trick, but we ask the team to write down their values. And it's so funny, because as soon as I ask and the slide comes up, everyone looks up and goes, we don't know. I don't know. Yeah. So then we do a little workshop on, embracing those values, doing thought leadership on those values, hiring performance reviews. Everything should be on those values and go through those values. So that's the most important things we did. And ours were family and health first, bold action, not to get, we find in corporate, what builds organizations is this entrepreneurial flair, that willingness to make mistakes and go and be bold and, do it. And then suddenly a company gets big, we fire all those people. It's crazy. So I'm quite passionate about that, because I was one of those people who often struggled in corporate because I was opinionated and I was risk tolerant, didn't always follow the right process, but would often come up with something better. Yeah. But those behaviors often get fired in corporate. So bold action, unfiltered expression, not being punished for what we say, avoiding our artificial harmony, but then also next to ownership, of the other thing we're quite passionate about is, I do think there's a generational shift of life is for living, not working, which I love, I mean, what's the point of life? You're going to die one day. But there's also a reality. Retired, we got 40 years to support ourselves. Like, there's a reality. Like, I think we're sometimes missing that if you want nice stuff and you want to be a success, and then that's not the be all and end all of life. We don't all need to have nice stuff. There's an ownership of making stuff happen and a responsibility to do that. And I see a lot of things on social media of these people saying, oh, look at my swimming pool and a car, look, and I'm drinking a smoothie for 4 hours a day. I don't know what they're doing, but that's not reality. Life is shit. And like, no Instagram account is going to kind of help you figure that out. It takes getting up every morning. It's grafting. It takes rejection. It takes, ownership of making things happen. I mean, I worked 18-hour days for 2 years. So I feel we're losing that sometimes because of, fake social media accounts, but I'm not going to harp on about that. And last of all, passion for making a difference. That's another value of us. We generally want people who believe in what our mission is: better world, better work. So that for us was the big turning point. It was starting and building our values. Every organization needs to refocus their values and really put a lot of effort into them.
If you could give one piece of advice to founders building their first revenue team, what would it be?
Revenue team.
Yeah.
So they've gone through a kind of startup and they're starting to make a couple of hires, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I got a good one here. Whatever you do, don't get one BDR. Because these founders, they expect just one person to come in and they'll say, we'll give you a realistic target. It's like, what stupid comments. Like, you're going to say to your first sales hire, oh, we can give you an unreasonable target. I just hate that. There's so many times I've been told that our targets are realistic. It's such a ridiculous thing to say. What I want to know is I want to understand the target and where it's going to come from, and put some numbers behind it. But anyway, going back to BDRs. You can't expect one miracle salesperson to come in. Like these people don't, very rarely exist. You're talking like one in tens of thousands who's going to come in and suddenly magically make something happen. It's so difficult to motivate yourself when you're on your own and you're trying to build something. It's killer. But if you've got a team of people, they work off competition. So what I would recommend is even if you make yourself a BDR, it doesn't matter. You need more than one. What you want to do is start that sales team with creating a system where you've got 3, because then their benchmark goes up. You've got one person, they'll make 30 calls a day. You got 3 people, they're going to make 70 calls a day because they're going to feed off each other, they're going to be competitive. So my advice is to kind of maybe, if you haven't got experience in setting up a sales system, hire someone like us to come in and do it for you. But you're probably going to be having a system where you can close, you can't probably just suddenly, unless you get a lot of investments. If you've got a lot of investments, it's a different response. If you're trying to kind of grow a little bit bootstrappy, do everything you can to get a team in so they feed off each other. I just see too many organizations just hire one person, and I know it's financially very difficult, but you're almost better off not doing it, having one person. So that's my first bit of advice. Second bit of advice is get an external consultant to come in and set up that system for you quickly. You'll save a lot of time and money. Again, we're expensive, but we'll do it in a week rather than you trying to figure it out over 7 months. Oh, I've probably got 100 responses to that question. I'll need to think about it a bit more next time. But that's my top tip, is never hire one BDR. If it's your first BDR, your absolute best to hire a few or 2. And if you can't do that, you be a BDR. Because then if it's your business, you are going to make 100 calls a day. And then the BDR will kind of replicate you. Yeah. So that's my top tip.
Well, Damon, thank you so much for these excellent answers, for your time. And I know our audience, we delighted with this interview.
You are absolutely welcome. You've asked some of my favorite questions. Just normally I get some, what's the word? I always get good questions, but I got particularly fun questions to dig in today. So no, thank you very much.
Well, people, thank you so much for watching this episode. See you next time. Bye.